This is what I call a speedy Centrify evaluation. We will be testing with Suite 2014. And the idea is to do a speed run on an evaluation for Standard Edition. Typically, before you do an evaluation, you want to know what you test for. So I've broken this in three categories. First is AD integration and authentication, which we're going to verify that the software does not require any schema extensions or software and domain controllers. We're going to make sure that not all users have access to Linux systems by default. That we're using standards and frameworks such as Kerberos, PAM, NSS, LDAP. That we won't be synchronizing any identities or passwords. That Unix-enabled users can be controlled through AD tools. That we're going to be integrating systems, and those systems can be integrated using GUI tools as well as the command line. We're going to make sure that policy is enforced as well. And that multiple Unix identities can be set up for a user. We're going to streamline authentication using SSO, and we're going to do automatic provisioning. Make sure that things can be automated. We're going to also integrate Samba or NFS. Make sure identities are consistent across the board. In category 2, we're going to deal about privilege management. And we're going to make sure that we can group systems based on what we want to do. That we can limit access using role-based access controls. And this is not limited to how people access systems, but also what can they do. We're going to enforce separation of duties. And we're going to make sure that we have the ability to see who has access to what at any moment. Finally, we'll do the advanced auditing capability of Enterprise Edition, and we'll be able to see a detailed view of what people do. And we'll be able to see what they did, replaying that sessions at any point. Finally, we'll be able to perform searches and queries and find out if when privileges were used across systems. Let's talk about the environment. So the environment, we have a Seinfeld theme going on here. We have a Windows 2008 domain controller. I have a member server here. We have a delegation model in which Windows administrators manage everything, but only Unix admins are going to be able to manage certain things. The Unix OU. We have an App1 member server. This is where we're going to be loading all the consoles and audit components. We have our Unix systems. We have Linux CentOS, SUSE, and Ubuntu. This one, CentOS, is a web server with Apache. We're going to pretend that our SUSE system is a database system. And we have this Ubuntu machine that is going to be a utility server with Samba. We're going to have 3 roles: web admins, DBAs, and sysadmins. Sysadmins access everything. Web admins only access our web systems, and DBA admins only access the database systems. We have a staff. This is a Seinfeld theme. So we have Jerry, who's the Windows admin, George, who's the Unix admin, Elaine's a DBA, Kramer is a web administrator, and Newman is an auditor. So we are also required to have a couple of Unix groups, DBA admin and web admin. And we have a daemon standard already set up. So with that, let's get started. So first thing we need to do, we need to start the delegation model in AD. I am actually logged in right now as our friend Newman. Actually, no, as our friend George. So George can't do anything in AD. He can't create high-level objects. So if he wants to create a high-level object, this is disabled right here. So we're going to have to run Active Directory users and computers as Jerry, so we can get what we want. All right, so now we're going to create a high-level OU, and we're going to delegate that to our friend Newman. So we're going to create a high-level OU. We're going to call it UNIX. And so check that. We don't need that right now. And once it's done, all we need to do is delegate. So by delegating, all we need to do is go in Security tab, find our friend. Actually, let's go in Advanced, make it much nicer. So we find our friend George. And we're going to make sure we allow him full control. And this is going to be this object and all the objects descending to it. That's it. That's the extent of the help that we need from the Windows administrator. At this point, George, the Unix administrator, can create any objects under this OU. This is a very simple delegation model. Typically in production environments, it's a little bit more complex. So let's go ahead and open this. And notice that now George can go in here and everything is lit up. So let's go ahead and create some OUs. So based on our delegation model right here, we're going to create a Unix OU with this structure here. So let's go ahead and create our zones OU. So that's where Centrify zones are going to reside. This is just for organizational purposes only. Think about Active Directory like a file system. You need to organize things and make sure that things make sense. We're going to create a licenses container. We're going to create a and let's make sure we put this in the right place. We're going to create an RBAC container. We're going to create a servers container. This is where our computers are going to go. And Unix groups container. Actually, wrong place for it. And I think it should be fine. This is a very simple model, and this all going to start to make sense once we start installing Centrify. So go ahead and close that. Make sure that no other MMC programs are open, and we're going to go to where I have the Centrify bits, and we're going to just run the installation. So we're going to do the suite. We're going to do direct manage 64. And we're going to run setup. George has the ability to install, to run any programs as an administrator in this machine only. So there's some MMC running. Let's see what's the MMC program that is running. Of course, Active Directory User and Computers. Let's close that guy. And now let's go ahead and run this. So walking through setup here, basically I had some components here I just want to add. So the only thing I had here was PuTTY. So let's go ahead and I'm going to add all these guys here. So ADUC is a property extension, allows you to see UID, GID information about users from ADUC. Access Manager is the main console. Documentation is all the PDFs. Group Policy Management extension allows you to do group policy for Unix, Linux, and Macs. And this guy allows you, it's a module for PowerShell. This is new for version 2014. And because we are going to be doing the automatic provisioning, we want to we want to check synchronization, actually, storm provisioning agent. So let's go ahead and do that. Our installation is going to run. While the installation is going, I could actually do something else, and is go to my Unix systems and just put in the agent. Basically, this is the tarball for the Centrify agent on Unix. So I'm going to go ahead and do. I'm going to untar that package, and I'm going to just basically put the bits in the machine. So do the same thing in my SUSE box. Same thing in my Ubuntu box. So some of the interesting things about how Centrify packages. So Centrify always puts in the native package. So in here, you will always see, the first thing you always need to do in Unix is, make sure you run AD check, because AD check verifies that everything is good to join the domain. Notice that there's always the native package. In the case of here, you have RPMs for both the CentOS and the SUSE. But if I go to my Ubuntu box, you will see that I have basically the Debian packages as well. So this is pretty cool because you can always use the native package manager. So let's go ahead and do a quick installation of both the base agent and the audit agent on the CentOS machine. So it would be RPM. So this is the Centrify DC package is the base package. So just, everything is done non-climactic here. Same thing, always make sure that you do an AD check. So if you wanted to do an AD check against the domain, in my case is corp.contoso.com. Important things to know about the AD check. AD check will check for basically the OS version if it's the right one. It's going to check for any patches. It's going to verify that the DNS is okay. It's going to communicate to the domain controllers. This is key here. So if you have the right TCP/IP configuration, everything should be fine. So in here saying, hey, there's only one DNS. This is just a test, so that's not a problem. In here, checks if SSH is working fine. So basically, AD check is your friend. So it seems that my installation has actually finished here. So I'm not going to configure this guy now. We're going to do that later. Everything we're going to do it manually first. So let's put this down a little bit. And Access Manager is the console, the main console for the Centrify installation. So I'm going to initialize Access Manager by running it for the first time. And it gives you the opportunity to connect as a different user. We don't need to do that because we already have the delegation to where we're going to put the objects. Again, it gives you another opportunity to change credentials. But notice here it says, hey, the Centrify container, by default, this is going to try and go to program data. We typically don't want to do that. We want to keep things clean. So, and again, we got the delegation, so we can't, even if we want to, we can't put things in there. So that's why we have that, the licenses container right here. So in here saying, hey, we're going to allow everybody to read the container. So all the objects in AD know about the Centrify license. This is perfectly okay. And here it's going to ask me for a license key. So, you know, license keys are typically provided to you by your Centrify, you know, your Centrify SC. All right, now that we have the key inserted, let's go ahead and do next. So same thing here. We're gonna, it's defaulting to program data, so we're gonna change it to the place that we designated before for zones. And we're gonna do next. Here we don't need to do this. Let's think about this. We don't need to grant computers in the computer container permission to update their own account information. Even if we wanted to do so, we can't, because our delegation model is not going to allow us to do it. Jerry can do it, we can't do it. Here we don't even need to do that. This is typically for production environments, and this is about allowing people to be notified if an object that they don't have viewing capabilities for other attributes, if they are going to delete it, they're going to get notified. This also requires a lot of power in AD to be done. So let's just go ahead and continue with this. And we want to activate the Centrify profile property pages. So it seems it doesn't have the rights to do that. This is another area in which the delegation is actually not allowing us to do this, but we want it to work like this. So we don't need to do that. Let's do next. And that's it. You know, our access manager has been initialized. One thing that we could do is start the audit installation at the same time, so we can gain some time. So let's go ahead and do the audit installation while we configure our zone, the first zone. So let's go ahead and under the Centrify folder that we have the bits. We're gonna go ahead and open, and we're gonna go to Suite, and we're gonna go Direct Audit. This is a simple install. Direct Audit is a 3-tier system. It has a database, collectors, and agents. So it's designed to scale. At the end of the day, this is a simple evaluation. Therefore, I'm going to put everything in a single box. In a production environment, you will have redundant database component, multiple collectors that can be load balanced and laid out for failover. And but in this case, we just want to test a few things. So we're going to load everything in this machine and continue with that. And while that's running, this is our speed run. So we're going to start configuring. So first thing I need to worry about is how is identity data is going to be handled in my UNIX environment. So I'm going to call this zone model, and as you can see, it's going to be stored under UNIX zones, and I can put a description here, but I'm just going to go next, and this is going to create a standard zone. The first thing I need to worry about is how usernames, UID, GID, and all that stuff is going to be handled. So for that, I go to Properties and User Defaults. This means that the login name is going to be the same as the account name in AD. This may or may not be desirable depending on the version of Unix you're running. HPUX AIX may not like more than 8 characters if they're not configured to do so. In here, this means that you can use either an auto-incremented UID, where you can have a range starting for whatever. By default, it's typically like 10,000. Or you can do a unique UID generated either through the Centrify algorithm based on the SID or the Apple scheme. Primary group, this is auto-private, typically good for Unix, Linux. Geckos is going to be the name of the person as is displayed in AD. This right here, these are time savers. Home directory and shell are going to be picked up from the OS. The cool thing is that if I were to maybe put bin bash in here, if I go to AIX, may not have it. So just keep that in mind. This is our great time savers here. User defaults, I want to just be consistent for groups as well. And identity information by default has been defined. the next step, and let's take a look at this. Okay, let's direct audit. Let's go ahead and install our audit store. So again, I'm required to have a license key for that. So I'm going to go ahead and get one. I'm going to go ahead and do next. And in here is basically asking you, where do you want the publication of this installation to be stored? In my particular case, I already have a place where everybody can read. So I'm going to leverage that, and that's the licenses container under UNIX. Centrify leverages a lot of Active Directory to help us configure things. And going back here to Access Manager, I'm jumping back and forth because my whole deal is to complete this evaluation as soon as I can. So jumping back and forth allows me to do things in parallel here. So let's take a look at what we defined. And here we defined that we're going to have collections of systems, like database systems, right? And web systems and utility systems. So I need to be able to organize computers that way. The way we do that with Centrify is through this authorization node right here. And I'm going to create what I call computer role assignments. So you get computers, you group computers in a way that makes sense to you. Before, Centrify's product has evolved a lot. So before there was needs to have multiple zones, hierarchical zones. Now the design favors a flat design in which you can leverage computer roles. So let's go ahead and create a new computer role. This is going to be for my web servers. And I'm going to create a new computer group for that purpose alone. I'm going to put it in my RBAC container. So that's going to be, and we have a naming convention, which is the platform, the collection, and the system. So it's going to be Unix model web servers, and that's it. Have my first collection of systems. Let's create another one. The other one is database systems. So let's create a new group. This is where computer objects are going to be contained. So for that collection of systems. So RBAC here, Unix model . There you go, database servers, and that's okay. And I have now created the groupings of systems. Because the Ubuntu system is going to be a utility systems accessed by everybody, I don't need to group it. Everybody needs access to it. I only need to group if I want to limit access based on a governance model. This could be app 1 prod, app 1 QA dev. It's up to you. The next thing I need to do is define what can be done by people, right? And this is done through what are called role definitions. So roles, the way to think about roles is, three steps. How do people access the system? What should they do? And what's the scope? So how do people access the system? If I look at my Unix rights, I can define more, but in this case I have SSH or everything. So for the first role, I'm going to think it's sysadmins. George is a sysadmin. He should have control over every machine. So he needs to have the ability to log in through any protocol and to run any command as root. But the command doesn't exist. I'm going to go ahead and create it. So I'm going to just very simple like that. The command is as simple as star does star. What that means, I can run any command from any path. That's the idea right there. And then you can either use global or regular expressions. You could go crazy with this. Restricted shell. This is not going to be running a restricted shell. the user, because he's a sysadmin, I want him to be able to do this as root, and this is going to be used by DZDo or Centrify enhanced sudo. No environment stuff, but this is dangerous. Therefore, I'm going to require authentication. Think about this. A lot of people walk away from their stations and they don't lock their stations. Imagine the power that somebody could have if you walk away and do that. So I'm going to require the user to type in their password. So I have the run any command as root. I have the login all PAM access. Therefore, I have the building blocks for a sysadmin role. So I'm going to call it UNIX sysadmin. There you go. Notice that I can set the times that and days that the role is available. In system rights, I'm going to go ahead and set the person to log in with or without SSO, with SSO, and I'm going to set the user to have a free shell, non-restricted shell. This audit looks fine for now. He's going to be audited, or she, or the members that have that role are going to be audited. Once the role has been created, and this is a common mistake, the role doesn't have any rights, so you have to go in and add the rights. In this particular case, we're going to do login all and run any command as root. So so I have the way the person can access, I have the commands that the person can run. Now I have to think about scope. There's 3 places that role assignments can be made. At the zone level, and this is used very sparingly, only for trusted people who can have governance over all systems. At the role assignment level, in which the scope is the actual group of machines, this is the most common assignment. There's another place where you can do a role assignment, but I'm not going to show it now. So I'm going to assign this role at the highest level, because in my case, George should have access and be able to do sysadmin activities in all machines. So I'm going to assign the UNIX sysadmin role, and I'm going to make this permanent. Notice that I can have a temporary assignment. This is great for break fixes or change control. But in this case, I'm going to make it permanent, and I'm going to add an AD account. I could assign this directly to George, but that's not good administration. Ideally, I would have an AD group that has my sysadmins, so the administration becomes much easier. And I think we should do that. We need to do that as well. So we're going to go to the RBAC. We're going to create a group. This group is going to be called UNIX Model Sysadmins. And this is we're gonna assign this role. That way, you don't have to touch Access Manager ever again. When you want to grant, add, move, or remove access, just use it through any tool that can do anything in Active Directory. This is a really great time saver. So we've created, this is admin. So let's talk about the web admin. For me, so scope, it would be at the web servers level. Type of access, I would say SSH access. And commands, that really depends. So I can go crazy here, but I'm going to just give this person 2 commands. The first one is service control for HTTPD. And this is service HTTPD star. So anything that you can do, restart, whatever, you could do it there. And there will be standard system path in here. No restricted shell as well. This is going to be run as root. I don't care. And you know what? I'm going to require authentication. The other command would be maybe edit the HTTPD file, the config file. So let's do so let's make it it will be vi etc httpd.conf, and standard user path is okay, and this it will be the same, and I'm going to require authentication. So we have the building blocks for the web administrator. So we're going to add role, UNIX, web administrator, password and non-password, and log in with a non-restricted shell. We're going to load our role here. This will be SSH and SSHD. I don't want the person to log in through the console. And it will be edit HTTPD and service control. This is my web admin role. And then where do I assign it? I'm going to assign it at the role assignment level on the web servers. But I don't have the group in AD, so let's create the group. So it would be UNIX model. It's web admins. And yep. So we can do the role assignment here, permanent assignment. So notice that we can reuse roles. That's one of the cool features as well. Notice that I have this, the naming convention helps me here. Finally, my DBAs. My DBA again, how does it access? I think also SSH. What can he or she do? Let's think about it. Let's pretend it's Oracle. So one thing I want to do is elevate to Oracle. The idea is that the person can become Oracle, but he or she does not know the Oracle password. So remember, this is privilege management. We're not dealing with password management here. Password management is a subset of the problem. So it would be su-oracle. And I would say standard user path is fine because that's where su is. But let's think about it from a second. No restricted shell. Who can impersonate any user? This is okay. So root is all right. And because this is dangerous to me, I'm going to require authentication. But the other one, maybe a DBA wants to run SQL plus as Oracle. So typically, the path to SQL plus is, like a weird path, but this is symbolic here. So so I'm gonna go ahead and SQL plus, and I'm gonna allow it to run it for any path. This is actually it's gonna be okay because it's gonna be run as Oracle, so I don't have to worry about anybody writing their own SQL plus script and then breaking or hacking my system. So I'm gonna remove root from there, and I'm gonna add it as Oracle. And that's it. And I'm gonna also require authentication. So again, I have the commands for the DBA. I have the access. So what's the scope? Let's create the role, of course. So again, I'm gonna be a little mechanic here, and my role is created, and all I need to do is put in the rights. So SSH, SSHD, elevate to Oracle, and SQL plus as Oracle. And the assignment, the scope, is actually going to be database systems. I'm going to assign the role, and DBA. Again, I don't have the AD group, so let's go ahead and create it. UNIX all. So my DBAs. One thing that I'm being very GUI oriented here, but a lot of the steps I'm doing are one-time steps. You do this, you set it, and that's it. You tweak it. But one of the benefits of Centrify is that both from Unix and from Windows, all these tasks can be performed using either PowerShell on Windows or the AD edit tickle language included with the agent. So there's a lot of options for automation. So I've added all this stuff. So let's add another role because we have an auditor. Newman is an auditor. So again, I think a scope for Newman would be all systems because he's an auditor. And I'm going to allow him to do this. I'm going to allow him to log in through SSH. But the only command that he'll be able to do is to tail the secure log. Let's do it for rel. So it will be tail bar log secure, and I think that's quite all right. No restricted shell, run as root, and I'm gonna require authentication. Most likely, if I want to have a different secure log location, I would have to create that command for the user, but let's create our auditor. So alright, and I'm gonna give that user, or that role actually, we're gonna give the rights of SSHD, and the ability to look at rel logs. And because the assignment, what I'm gonna make this assignment something that we do on demand. So I'm not gonna do any assignments. The role is created. So let's just leave it at that. And with that, we've actually, believe it or not, almost configured the whole thing. Let's go ahead and configure some group policies, and let's go ahead and finish this setup that was waiting for us. This is the direct audit setting of the SQL Server Express for the audit components. While that has happened, we're gonna go ahead and let's just do some GPOs so we can make things much easier for everybody. So I'm gonna go ahead and open Group Policy Management. And here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna create a new GPO, and this GPO is gonna have settings for making the life easy of people who may not know the context of how you're logging in. Actually, notice this. My user can create GPOs in here. So this is another example in which we will have to create or do a be creative about delegation. So let's pretend that George calls Jerry and say, hey, I need to create a GPO. Can you create it for me, and then I'll configure it. It's very simple. So Jerry will actually just run group policy management the same way. I'm gonna put it on the desktop. So we're gonna do run as a different user. So Jerry can create GPOs, and we're going to create the GPO and delegate it back to the Unix administrator. So we're going to do it at the server level here, and all we need to do is, go to the GPO, or double click the GPO in this case. All right, and we're going to delegate access. So there's going to be a delegate tab, delegation, and we're going to add, and we're going to delegate it to George, and George's going to get the ability to basically full control on the GPO. Now Jerry finishes his job, says, hey, his GPO is ready. George, you can open group policy management and do your job. So now when we go out there, you see that the GPO has been created, and that our user has the ability to edit the GPO. So Centrify provides hundreds of GPOs for multiple purposes. But in my particular case, I'm interested in some of the GPOs that are used to control password prompts. So the first thing you need to do is add and remove templates. This is always good to be done whenever there's an upgrade as well. So we're going to do Centrify Linux, Centrify Unix, and Centrify DC. So we're going to open this one, and this one. So the Centrify direct control settings control the parameters of the config file from GPOs, from group policies. So what I'm interested in here is in password prompts. So what could be the issue here? There's probably exists users in the local.c password file in NIS or LDAP. You want to be able to give a visual cue to somebody when they want to log in, when they put their AD account, so they know which password they're putting in. Because in a lot of implementations, it takes a little while for everything to be migrated into AD. So the first one I want to change is the password prompt. So I'm going to enable that. Just to put a little context on it, I'm just going to say AD password. Same thing for the password change text. So all I'm doing here, and this is only going to apply when somebody from AD is coming in. So making some changes here, just to put the right context. And some of the more relevant ones. So it's all contextualizing. So, and instead of new password, AD password. So somebody knows exactly what they're doing in case of that. And this is the last one. The other thing I want to do, maybe it's not over yet, but let's see if we can see the direct audit settings. One of the benefits of Centrify is that it allows you to publish settings in Active Directory. So it hasn't finished the installation, so that's why it's not available. But instead of having to configure a config file, you can just read that through GPOs. Makes your life way much easier. But that's not finished yet. So let's go ahead and continue what we're doing. So with that in mind, we have everything ready. We can start continue working on the Unix side. So I think that on CentOS we put in the Centrify DC. So let's put the Centrify DA agent on it. So it's the audit base agent plus audit. That's using the native package manager. Another thing that Centrify provides is the install.sh script. So it allows you to do something like this. You could go and do so So here it's going to ask you, hey, you know, what installation you want to do. You want to do enterprise. In my particular case, I don't want to run AD check. I know everything is fine. I want to join manually, so I'm okay. I don't want to enable auditing. I want to do it manually. So again, the cool thing is Centrify gives you a native package, Centrify install.sh. So you have two avenues to install the agent. Install.sh also can use a script for like an answer file for the installation. So and let's go ahead and maybe we could do that. Let's take a look. So it will be so let me see. So one thing that we could do is, you know, set up this answer file and put in what we want to do. So let's see. So it would be we have to set the domain. So it would be the domain right there. We need to set up the user. I'm gonna do something cool here. I'm gonna just not use, because you never want to put credentials on the clear on an answer file of a script. We have a couple things that we could do. So AD check, AD license, AD join. I would say no. Oh, actually, there's a mistake here. And let's see, my zone, it would be in here, zone. Model. Let's see, the container, so would be, let's see, OU equals servers, OU equals UNIX. Can tell that my VI skills are not very good. Probably the terminal, the way I have it set up. I think it should be fine. So I'm putting in domain, I'm putting in the container, I'm putting in the zone. I think it's okay. So starting with my CentOS, the first thing we need to know is that when you put in the bits for Centrify, nothing has happened. Actually, the best way to know is to use the AD-info command. Not join to any zone. If you do, if you look at the NSS switch file, notice that it's probably pointing still to files. You see what it says, password has a Centrify ID in there, but files, there's nothing in there. So pretty much, you know, no major changes have been done to the system at all. So a system needs to be joined to AD. So there's several ways to do it. I'm going to do a forced, basically an administrative join. So it would be AD join minus I for no, actually I don't need to not initialize. So it would be minus Z for the zone model in this case, minus C for the container where I want to put computers on, and it would be OU equals UNIX, sorry, servers, OU equals UNIX, and then the user, verbose, because we want to verbose, the user is George. George is the person who can join systems to AD. In this case, he can only do it to that container because we delegated at the beginning. And the name of the domain. So it's going to ask me for his password. So we've joined the system, and now the AD info should show something different. So if we do an AD info, should show, hey, you're connected, you joined to that system. But at this point, it fails. There's no users because we have not provisioned any user to have access. So if I do, there's a command, it's called AD query user, shows you nothing. Nobody's coming from AD because by default, standard edition does not grant access to anybody. This is a really important distinction between the express free agent. With the free agent, everybody from AD will have access.